believed in the Hollow Pines legend until the night the bell chose us. It was Halloween, and the town of Graythorn always buzzed with talk of the old cemetery on the hill. Every year someone claimed they'd heard the ancient bell ring. At midnight, even though the rope had rotted decades ago and the iron clapper was supposed to be rusted solid. My friends and I laughed it off until we decided to test it ourselves. I was the one who pushed for it. Maybe it was the cheap bourbon we'd been passing around, or maybe I just wanted to impress Natalie. There were 4 of us, me, Natalie, Jared, and Drew. We were seniors, desperate for one last thrill before college scattered us. Around 11:30, with a thin moon hanging like a dull blade above the pines, we crept up the gravel path. The cemetery gates groaned when Jared shoved them open. Cold air poured through, smelling of wet earth and rust. Inside, the world was gray and breathless. Fog clung low to the crooked stones, curling around our legs like restless spirits. The chapel ruin loomed ahead, its bell tower a jagged silhouette against the stars. Natalie squeezed my hand. Her palm was damp and cold. We set up near the tower, flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the mist. The bell above was a black mass, a relic from the 1800s. No rope hung from it now, just a frayed stub swaying gently as if stirred by invisible fingers. Probably squirrels, Drew muttered, but his voice carried a tremor. Minutes dragged. The air grew heavier, colder. My breath turned to smoke, and the silence deepened until even our nervous whispers felt sacrilegious. At 5 to midnight, the wind died completely. Not a single leaf rustled. My ears strained against the quiet. Then came the first low hum, so faint I thought it was in my head. A metallic vibration, like a tuning fork struck in the distance. Natalie's eyes widened. Jared lifted his light to the bell. It shuddered. The hum swelled into a deep, resonant gong that rolled through the graves like a physical force. My chest rattled with it. A second chime followed, louder, echoing through the woods. The ground seemed to pulse beneath my boots. "There's no rope," Drew shouted, voice cracking. "It can't." A third toll cut him off. The fog thickened, rising like smoke from unseen fires. Shapes shifted within it, tall, human shapes that flickered in and out of view. I smelled something coppery, like old blood. Jared swung his light wildly. "Who's there?" he barked. The fourth chime boomed, and the flashlight went dark. Jared cursed and smacked it, but the batteries were fresh. My own beam sputtered, shrinking to a weak glow. Natalie's grip tightened on my arm. "We should go," she whispered. We turned toward the gate. The path was gone, swallowed by fog. I could barely see the headstones at my feet. Drew broke into a run, the crunch of gravel fading quickly into silence. "Drew," I called. "No answer." The bell rang again. 5th. Each strike was louder than the last, a colossal heartbeat shaking marrow and stone. I stumbled forward, coughing as the air turned damp and metallic. The mist tasted like pennies. Jared sprinted past me, vanishing into the gray. Natalie and I clung to each other, moving blindly. My flashlight flickered out, leaving only the ghostly moonlight diffused in the fog. 6th toll. A scream tore the night. Jared's voice, sharp then cut short. I froze, every nerve screaming to run, yet my legs felt rooted. 7th. Natalie pulled me, her breath hot against my ear. "Keep moving," she hissed. We stumbled between leaning markers and cracked angels, the world spinning and featureless. White 8th. Ahead, a faint glow, orange like candlelight, pulsed through the mist. We followed it, desperate for any sign of escape. It led us to an open grave. Fresh soil piled neatly beside it, darker than the night around us. At its bottom, something gleamed. 9th. A coffin. The lid slid open with a soft scrape, though no one touched it. Inside lay a body, my body. Eyes closed, hands crossed, skin pale as the moon. Natalie screamed and stumbled back. 10th. The ground trembled. From the fog behind us came a low moan, then the crunch of footsteps. Slow, heavy. 11th. Natalie turned to run and vanished. Not into the fog, just gone, as if the air swallowed her whole. Her scream cut off mid-breath. I was alone. 12th. The final strike reverberated through the cemetery like the end of the world. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the tower above. The bell hung still, but a figure stood beside it, tall, cloaked, in shadow, no face beneath the hood. In one hand it held the rotten rope, though it wasn't attached to anything. In the other, a small brass bell that gleamed with fresh polish. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. The figure tilted its head, almost curious. Then it raised the brass bell and rang it once. The sound pierced straight through me, cold and endless. The world went black. I woke at dawn, lying among cracked stones. The fog had lifted. Birds sang. No friends, no footprints. Only the ancient bell above, motionless, silent. My phone read 12:01. I stumbled to the gate, legs numb, and nearly tripped over 3 fresh graves. Each had a simple wooden marker, the names burned in black: Natalie Holt, Jared Finch, Drew Callahan. The 4th marker was blank. As I fled the hill, a single low chime rolled across the morning air, too faint for anyone in town to hear, but enough to stop me cold. It came from the bell tower, steady and patient, promising it would finish its count. I never returned to Hollow Pines, but every Halloween, just past midnight, I hear that solitary toll no matter where I am. An echo in my bones, a reminder that the bell is still waiting for my name, my name. I never meant to chase ghosts. I only wanted a story worth telling. My name's Evan, 17 and restless, a kid with more curiosity than sense. Blackthorn Graveyard was a 5-minute bike ride from my house, a sprawl of leaning stones and black-barked oaks that seemed to drink the moonlight. Everyone in town whispered about the Lantern Keeper, a cloaked figure who wandered the cemetery each Halloween, his dim lantern flickering where the next grave would be dug. Some said he guided spirits, others swore he marked the living. I didn't buy any of it. But after years of hearing my classmates swap "I swear it's true" stories, I decided to film the legend myself. Proof or bust. Halloween night was cold enough to taste metal in the air. I packed my camera, phone, and a flashlight with fresh batteries. Mom thought I was at a friend's party. Instead, I pedaled through the sleeping streets until the wrought iron gates loomed ahead. They creaked open with a groan that vibrated in my ribs. Inside, the world narrowed to shadows and fog. Wet leaves clung to my sneakers. The smell of damp earth and moss seeped through my hoodie. Every breath felt thick, like inhaling river water. For the first half hour, I saw nothing but crooked markers and the occasional marble angel, wings mottled with lichen. My camera lens fogged in the cold, catching halos of moonlight. I was about to call it when a faint amber glow flickered deep among the trees. My heart lurched. The lantern. It bobbed slowly, an old-fashioned light, dim and honey-colored, just bright enough to stain the mist. I crouched behind a monument, pulse hammering. Through the drifting fog, I saw the figure, tall, draped in a cloak so black it drank the night. No face, no hands, only that swaying lantern. I raised my camera. The screen stayed dark. Dead battery, though I'd charged it fully. My phone, too, blinked to black the moment I tried to record. The lantern drifted on. I followed, every step muffled by damp soil. A low wind whispered through the trees, carrying a scent like candle wax and iron. The figure never hurried, never looked back, gliding between stones as if weightless. After what felt like forever, it stopped beside a patch of bare earth. The lantern brightened, casting long amber beams across the graves. I eased closer, heart thudding like a drum. The ground here was softer, as though freshly turned. No stone, no marker, just raw dirt. The lantern flared again, sudden and sharp. I shielded my eyes. When the light faded, a small wooden stake jutted from the soil where moments before there had been nothing. A square of white paper fluttered from it. I crept forward and read the name scrawled in black ink. Evan Calder. The letters bled as I stared, the ink spreading like veins across the page. My breath caught. The figure turned at last, and though the hood revealed nothing, I felt a gaze sink through my skin. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a stone. "Who are you?" My voice cracked. The lantern keeper lifted the light higher. The flame hissed, turning a deep, unnatural blue. The temperature dropped so fast my teeth ached. Frost spiderwebbed across the nearby stones. A low hum began, like a church organ played underwater. I bolted. The cemetery twisted around me. Paths I knew by heart bent in impossible angles. Fog poured from the ground, cold and heavy, clinging to my legs like wet cloth. Every few steps the lantern's glow flickered ahead, no matter which direction I ran. I veered left, lungs burning, and collided with a tall marker. Pain shot through my shoulder. When I scrambled upright, the figure stood no more than 10 feet away. The blue flame lit the folds of the cloak, revealing a texture like writhing smoke. Beneath the hood was only darkness, yet I sensed something, vast and ancient, staring out. "Stop!" I choked out, though I didn't know if it was a plea or command. The lantern dipped toward the earth. The flame pulsed once. The soil at my feet shivered, then cracked. Fingers of pale root or bone pushed through, curling around my sneakers. The smell of fresh clay and rot hit me, sharp and wet. I tore free and sprinted, not caring where. Headstones blurred in silver and black. My lungs scraped raw with every breath. Behind me the hum deepened, a vibration that rattled my teeth and seemed to pull at the blood in my veins. At last I saw the gate, rusted iron, moonlit and real. I lunged for it, slammed through and tumbled onto the frost-bitten grass of the roadside. The humming ceased. Silence crashed over me. When I dared to look back, the cemetery lay empty. No light, no figure, only still fog curling among the stones. I stumbled home, half frozen, shoes caked with mud. My camera and phone powered on the moment I crossed my porch, batteries at full charge. The footage showed nothing but static. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, exhausted and shaking, I returned to Blackthorn, part of me hoping it had been a dream. The gates hung slightly open, dew sparkling on the iron. I followed the path to where I'd seen the wooden stake. The ground there was smooth, undisturbed. No paper, no sign of digging. But as I turned to leave, a flash of white caught my eye. Near the entrance stood a fresh headstone, its granite slick with morning frost. The date etched beneath the name stopped my breath. Evan Calder, October 31st, today's date. The stone felt warm when I touched it, as though alive. A faint scent of candle wax lingered in the air. I ran. All day the name burned behind my eyes, and when night fell again, a dim amber light flickered outside my window, swaying gently in the dark. I never meant to stay in Black Hollow after college, but life has a way of keeping you in the places you once swore you'd outgrow. By last Halloween I was 26, still living above the hardware store my father left me, and restless enough to follow any rumor that promised a jolt of life. That's how I ended up in St. Dunstan's Cemetery after midnight, flashlight in hand, breath steaming in the brittle October air. Everyone in town knew of Old Harlan, the caretaker who dug graves, long after the world stopped asking him to. People whispered he spent every Halloween night in the back lot, shoveling at nothing. When kids asked why, he'd rasp the same words, "Paying my debt to the earth." I told myself I was only out there to film him, maybe post a clip that would finally make my stagnant channel worth watching. Truth was, I wanted proof of something strange, anything to break the weight of ordinary days. The moon was a cracked porcelain plate behind racing clouds when I slipped through the rusted gate. Damp leaves slicked the path, their scent sharp as iron. Far back among the crooked stones, a dull metallic scrape rose and fell in steady rhythm. I followed it, each step sucking into cold mud. The cemetery stretched wide and silent. Monuments, leaning like old drunks. Angels streaked black with lichen. The scrape grew louder, joined by the soft grunt of effort. At the far edge of the grounds, I found him. Harlan was older than I remembered. Skin the color of candle wax, beard gone too, tangled silver. He wore a long brown coat dark with soil and swung his shovel with methodical precision, though the ground already held a yawning hole 6 feet deep. No coffin, no marker, just raw black earth. "Evenin'," he said without looking up. His voice rasped like gravel in a tin can. "Evening," I managed, raising my flashlight. "Late to be working." He planted the shovel and leaned on it. "Work don't end when the world owes you, son. Gotta pay the debt." "What debt?" I asked, though the words scraped my throat. His eyes lifted, pale and cloudy, like frozen water. "The one we all owe, some of us sooner, some later." Then he gave a thin smile and went back to digging. The wind stirred, carrying the smell of turned soil and something faintly metallic, like a pocket of blood opened beneath the ground. My camera phone trembled in my hand. I wanted to leave, but curiosity rooted me. Behind me, footsteps crunched. I turned to see 3 local teens, faces half hidden by hoodies. One of them, a broad kid with a sly grin, called out, "Hey, old man, how many holes you digging tonight? One for each of us?" The others laughed, sharp and mean. Harlan didn't look up. He just drove the shovel deep. "Shunk, shunk." The big kid sauntered closer, kicking at the piled dirt. "Debt to the earth, right? What did you do? Steal a pumpkin?" I opened my mouth to tell them to back off, but the ground answered first. A muffled crack rippled under our feet. The soil trembled, then split with a wet sigh. Cold air rushed upward, smelling of clay and old rain. The laughter died. Before any of us could move, the earth yawned wide in 3 sudden bursts, one beneath each boy. Fresh graves gaped at their sneakers, edges sharp and impossibly neat, as though carved by invisible hands. They jumped back with yelps, but the holes followed, widening with each heartbeat. Inside each pit lay a wooden stake marked by a white card. From where I stood, I could read the black letters written in a careful hand. The big kid's name. The second boy's, the third, and beneath each name, today's date. The smell of raw soil thickened, metallic and damp. The boys scrambled, shoes slipping, curses flying. The holes stretched after them like hungry mouths. "Stop!" I shouted at Harlan. "What is this?" He finally looked up, eyes pale as fog. "Not me," he said softly. "The earth knows its debt." One boy made it to the path and bolted, shrieking. Another tripped on a root and vanished with a sudden downward pull, the earth closing over him as though he'd never been. The third scrambled over a headstone, sobbing, and disappeared behind the trees. I backed away, heart battering my ribs. The ground beneath me felt soft, alive. Then came the 4th crack. I looked down. A fissure traced a circle around my boots. Soil shifted, drawing inward. A fresh stake rose from the dark like a candle from wax. A card fluttered against it, catching the moonlight. My name. October 31st. My stomach turned to ice. I stumbled backward, but the circle followed, tightening, the soil sinking with a slow, deliberate pull. The sound wasn't just shifting dirt now. It was breathing, deep and steady. Harlan climbed from his pit with a grace that belied his years. He stood beside me, shovel across his shoulders. "Told you," he said almost kindly. "We all pay." "No," I rasped. "Not me." He tilted his head, then run. I ran. The cemetery twisted around me, headstones blurring into streaks of gray. Roots snagged my ankles, cold mist clawed my lungs. Behind me came the low groan of earth closing, again and again, like a predator swallowing its meal. At the gate, I tripped and sprawled onto the gravel road. The night snapped back to silence. No footsteps, no breathing ground, only the dry rasp of wind through skeletal branches. I didn't look back. When I reached town, the streets lay empty, windows dark. My watch read 2:13 a.m. I collapsed on my porch, mud streaking my jeans, and stared until dawn bled across the roofs. I told no one. But the next evening, curiosity or madness dragged me to the cemetery once more. The gates hung open. The path was smooth, unbroken. Harlan's shovels rested neatly against the tool shed, their blades polished clean. Near the far edge, 4 new mounds of soil rose in perfect lines. 3 bore simple wooden crosses etched with the boys' names. The 4th stood bare. I turned to leave, but a faint scrape sounded behind me, metal biting earth in a slow, patient rhythm. Harlan's voice floated through the fog, gentle as falling dirt. Still a debt to pay. I ran again, but even as I reached the gate I could feel it, the ground softening underfoot, waiting. I never believed in haunted statues. Marble is marble no matter what stories people tell. But that October night I went to St. Aurelia Cemetery with my sketchbook anyway. I'm a freelance illustrator, 29, and desperate for a new portfolio piece. The town rumor, an angel that wept real tears each Halloween, sounded like the kind of gothic subject that might finally get me noticed. I told myself it would be a moody drawing, nothing more. The cemetery lay a mile from the last streetlight, a sprawl of leaning stones hidden behind a wrought iron fence. The night air smelled of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. My breath fogged white in the cold as I pushed the gate. It groaned, hinges grinding like a throat clearing itself. I found the angel easily. She stood near the chapel ruin, wings spread, wide, face tilted as if listening to a prayer. Cracks spiderwebbed her cheeks and a film of moss darkened her robe. The marble caught the moonlight in a pale glow, so lifelike it almost breathed. I settled on a stone bench and unzipped my kit. Pencil, charcoal, sketch pad. My flashlight rested beside me, its beam a thin silver cone. Hours slid by. The cemetery was silent except for the occasional hiss of wind through dry grass. I sketched each feather, the chipped halo, the rough seam, where her arm had once broken and been repaired. Near midnight, the air changed. A low mist crept between the headstones, carrying the coppery tang of wet metal. My pencil slowed. A faint sound, like a drop of water, tapped against the marble. Then another. I lifted the flashlight. A dark trail ran down the angel's left. Cheek condensation, I thought. Dew. I touched it with the tip of my finger. Warm. I jerked back. The liquid clung to my skin, thick and red as a fresh cut. The smell of iron rose sharp and unmistakable. Blood. A chill crawled over my scalp. I wiped my finger on my jeans, heart hammering. More drops slid from the statue's eyes, gathering into a slow crimson line. The angel's cracked lips seemed to tremble. "This is a trick," I whispered. My own voice sounded small, swallowed by the fog. The flashlight flickered. A gust of wind slammed through the chapel ruin, rattling loose stones. I heard a low, almost human moan ride the gust. I packed up fast, but when I reached for the sketchbook, it wouldn't budge. The paper, edges were damp, fused to the stone bench as if glued by the mist. I tugged harder. The pages tore with a wet sound. Behind me, stone scraped stone. I turned. The angel's arms had lowered. I knew every line of that statue by now, every angle I'd drawn, but the wings were closer, the marble hands extended, palms cupped toward me like an offering. My breath snagged. "No," I whispered, though there was no one to hear. The warm copper scent thickened until it coated the back of my throat. My flashlight died with a soft pop. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint lunar glow on marble. Something wet splattered my shoe. I bolted for the gate, feet skidding on slick grass. The fog closed in, heavy as wool. Headstones loomed and vanished like shapes in a nightmare. Every direction looked the same. Behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate, pressed into the earth. Stone couldn't move like that, I told myself, but the sound followed, crunch for crunch, perfectly timed to my own. I reached the fence at last and clawed at the latch. It refused to budge, the metal icy against my palms. Then, a breath at my Ear. Not wind, but something warm and damp. Finish it, a voice whispered, soft as a sigh, but close enough to stir the hairs on my neck. I spun around. The angel stood less than an arm's length away inside the gate, wings folded tight, head bowed. Her marble hands were no longer empty. My sketchbook rested in her grip, pages crumpled and slick. Between them something pulsed, a slow, wet throb that pushed against the paper like a heartbeat. My own heart answered, frantic. The latch clicked open by itself. I stumbled through and ran until the cemetery lights vanished behind me. I slept little. When I woke late the next morning, the smell of iron clung to my clothes. My sketchbook lay on the kitchen table, though I was certain I'd left it behind. Every page was soaked with faint red smears except the last, where a new drawing filled the paper. Not my hand, lines too sure, too elegant. It showed the angel, with eyes closed, but her lips curved in a soft, knowing smile. And in the crook of her marble arms, she held something dark and wet, shaped exactly like a human heart. When I touched the page, it beat once, slow and deliberate, beneath my fingertips. I'm a musician first, a rational man second. That's what I told myself as I followed the music through the Caraway Cemetery. Halloween night had always meant late gigs for me, but this year I had nothing booked. A cold front had rolled through, and the town felt hollow and restless. I'd brought my guitar to the hillside graveyard, hoping to steal a quiet hour to practice. Instead, I heard that sound. It began as a low hum that barely threaded through the wind. A melody so faint I thought I imagined it. 4 notes, rising and falling like a sigh. No rhythm of footsteps, no rustle of leaves could mimic it. When I stilled my breathing, I could pick out chords beneath the tune, a mournful harmony, ancient and deliberate. It came from the Caraway Crypt. Everyone in town knows that name. The family line burned out a century ago after a house fire claimed the last heirs. The stone crypt on the North Ridge is their only monument. Kids dare each other to touch its iron door, but no one goes near after dark. I should have walked away. Instead, I slung the guitar on my back and picked my way up the gravel path. Curiosity is a musician's disease. The gate's hinges screamed when I opened it. Cold air, sharp with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, rolled across my face. I gripped my flashlight tighter. The crypt stood squat and square beneath a twisted oak. Moonlight silvered the stone, but the heavy door was blacker than the night. Rusted chains crossed it, secured with a padlock big enough to anchor a ship. No light leaked from the cracks, yet the melody seeped through as clear as if someone played. Just behind the door, I pressed my ear to the iron. The music vibrated faintly against my skin, strings plucked with aching precision. My heart matched the tempo without meaning to. Then I noticed the panel. A chunk of stone at the side had broken away, leaving an opening no wider than a man's shoulders. Cold air breathed out, carrying the dry, metallic scent of old wood and dust. I told myself I'd peek, nothing more. The moment I ducked inside, the temperature dropped as if I'd plunged underwater. My breath fogged and drifted upward, swallowed by darkness. The melody swelled, not echoing but alive, notes bending like light through water. I swept my flashlight across the chamber. Cobwebs glittered where the beam passed. 4 stone biers lined the walls, each marked with the Caraway name. Dust sheeted everything in a gray veil. And then, the instruments. A violin rested upright on a coffin lid, bow moving as if guided by invisible hands. A tarnished trumpet hovered a foot off, the ground, valves pressing and releasing with crisp precision. A cello leaned against a column, its strings vibrating, the bow stroking an invisible arc. No players, only shadows, elongated and restless, skimming the walls in time with the music. My throat tightened. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. The melody faltered, then swelled richer as though my words were a cue. I should have run. Instead, I unslung my guitar. Maybe it was pride, maybe something else. I strummed a tentative chord, soft enough to barely carry. Instantly, the Ensemble shifted key to match me. Harmonies wrapped around my notes like warm smoke. The sound was intoxicating. Perfect pitch. Every vibration threading through my bones. The walls themselves seemed to breathe with it. My fingertips danced of their own accord. The music grew faster, intricate. I forgot the chill, the crypt, the empty night beyond. I played until my calluses ached and the blood in my ears pulsed with the rhythm. Then the shadows moved closer. I felt them before I saw them. Cool drafts sliding across my wrists, the faint pressure of presence just beyond. Sight. In the flashlight's edge, shapes coalesced. Tall silhouettes with hollow centers, as if someone had carved human forms from smoke. They swayed like reeds to the music, and when I faltered, they leaned in, expectant. The violin shrieked a high note that stabbed the air. The trumpet followed with a brassy command. My guitar strings tightened under my fingers until the wood trembled. Enough, I whispered, backing toward the panel. The melody shifted, minor to major, a pleading that was almost words. My flashlight flickered and died. Darkness wrapped me. Only the phantom glow of moonlight through the hole remained. Something cold brushed my shoulder, a hand made of night. I spun and the shapes loomed, taller, denser, their edges rippling like banners in a storm. The music thundered around us, a sound that was not heard but felt, vibrating through teeth and marrow. I lunged for the opening. My guitar strap snagged on something unseen. I yanked hard, wood scraping stone, and tumbled out into the wet grass. The music cut off. The night exploded with silence, so deep my ears rang. Only my ragged breath and the rustle of leaves remained. I scrambled to my feet. The crypt loomed still and mute, door chained, as if nothing had stirred for 100 years. Back home, I set the guitar in its stand and noticed a new string had appeared. Thin, black, slick with a cold sheen like dew. I plucked it. The four-note melody sang back, perfect and unbroken. I haven't slept since. Every night at 3:03 a.m., the guitar plays those four notes on its own. Sometimes I hear other instruments joining in from somewhere down the hall. I locked the case. I hid the key. It doesn't matter. The song keeps growing, and when I close my eyes, I feel hands, cool and patient, guiding mine back to the strings. I visit my grandmother's grave every Halloween. It started as a promise the night she died. Just me, 16 and trembling, whispering that I'd never let the autumn pass without her. 7 years later, the ritual feels less like love and more like gravity. No matter where I am, something pulls me back to the old churchyard on the hill. Tonight the air is sharp enough to taste. The path crunches with frost-kissed leaves as I climb past leaning stones and rusted gates. My flashlight throws a thin beam, more suggestion than light, and every step stirs the scent of damp soil and iron. Wind snakes through the bare branches. With a dry rattle, the sound of bones learning to speak. Grandma Ruth lies beneath a crooked cedar near the edge of the cemetery. Her headstone is small, the name worn pale by years of rain. I kneel to brush away the leaves and breathe in the earth's chill, that mineral smell that clings to the back of the throat. "Hi, Grandma," I say, my voice a cloud in the cold. I brought chrysanthemums again. Silence, save for the sigh of wind. I arrange the flowers, tracing the carved letters with a gloved finger. Then a sound threads through the air. A whisper. I freeze. Maybe it's wind in the cedar's branches, or the hiss of dead grass. But it shapes itself into syllables. Thin, deliberate, Emily, my name. I jerk the flashlight toward the trees. Nothing but darkness, deep and endless. The beam trembles with my hand. Who's there? The question comes out strangled. The whisper drifts again, lower, richer. Not quite Grandma's voice, but close enough to scrape something raw inside me. He hid the letters behind the wall. My mouth goes dry. Letters? My grandmother's old house was sold years ago, gutted by strangers. I step closer to the headstone, knees damp from the cold grass. "What letters?" I whisper back before I can stop myself. The earth seems to inhale. Then, "Your father. He never told you why I stayed." The wind rises, carrying the scent of smoke and something sweet, like burned sugar. My father? He'd always claimed Ruth left their hometown for love, nothing more. I swallow hard, heart hammering. Another whisper, faster now. Blood in the orchard. Buried deep. He lied. He lied. Images flash. The orchard behind Grandma's house, rows of apple trees slick with autumn rain. I shake my head, trying to fling the thoughts away. This isn't real, I mutter. I'm just tired. But the air thickens, heavy as wet cloth. The ground beneath me softens, the soil damp and warm, like flesh. "You carry it too," the voice hisses, a debt unpaid. Something shifts behind the cedar, a scrape of stone, deliberate and slow. "Hello?" My voice cracks. "Grandma?" The whisper sharpens, now unmistakably hers, the lilt I remember from bedtime stories. "Emily." I whirl. The flashlight sputters, casting long black shapes across the headstones. She's behind me. I don't see her, but I feel the presence. The faint warmth of breath against my neck, the press of eyes where none exist. The cedar creaks like an old door swinging wide. "You're dead," I say, the words thin as paper. "So are you." The whisper answers. My chest constricts. "No. You came when I called. You always would." The ground quivers. A hairline crack splits the soil across the grave, dark and wet. I stumble back, my foot sinking ankle-deep into sudden softness. It grips like a hand. I wrench free, heart slamming, and the earth exhales a damp heat that smells of copper and rot. The chrysanthemums topple, their petals darkening as if soaked in ink. "Stop," I scream into the night. "Leave me alone." The cemetery answers with silence. Even the wind holds its breath. I run. The path snakes through stones etched with names I don't dare read. My flashlight beams wildly, catching glimpses of carved angels and open mouths of shadow. Each step feels muffled, as though the ground has turned to ash. Then a final whisper, soft, intimate, slides directly into my ear. "Behind you." I spin. The flashlight catches a figure half hidden in the cedar's shadow. Small, stooped, the silhouette of a woman I once knew by heart. Her face is lost in darkness, but I see the curve of her smile. And in that instant, I hear my own voice, not hers, repeat the word, low and sure. "Emily." The light dies. I woke on my couch at dawn, clothes caked. With mud, the scent of iron in my hair. My phone showed hours missing, blank as if erased. But dirt from the cemetery still clung under my nails, black and damp. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? Last night I dreamed of the orchard behind Grandma's house. The trees bled where they'd been cut, and something moved beneath, the roots waiting for me to dig. This evening I keep hearing it again, faint but clear, curling through the quiet of my apartment. Behind you, I haven't turned around. I'd never believed a building could be alive. Not until Halloween night, when I stepped into the Caraway Mausoleum. My name's Danny. I film urban exploration videos, abandoned factories, crumbling hospitals, places where the dark feels thick enough to taste. The old hilltop cemetery outside Brindle Creek was supposed to be just another backdrop for a Halloween upload. Century-sealed tomb opens overnight. Clickbait gold. 4 of us went in. Me, my brother Jake, our friend Marcy, and Cole, who insisted he wasn't scared of anything. Midnight air clung damp against our jackets as we climbed the slope, flashlights slicing through fog like pale knives. Frosted grass crackled under our boots, and the smell of whetstone and autumn rot filled the air. The mausoleum stood at the hill's crest, a squat block of black granite veined with moss. Its bronze door gaped open a few inches, even though locals swore it had been sealed for 100 years. I ran my fingers over the metal, cold enough to burn, yet faintly slick. like skin touched with sweat. Jake grinned. "Looks like someone beat us here." "No footprints," Marcy murmured, sweeping her light across the frosted ground. The grass lay unbroken. I pushed. The door swung wider with a low groan that vibrated up my arms. Inside, the smell hit first. Damp limestone mixed with something faintly sweet, like fruit left to spoil. Our flashlights jittered across rows of marble crypts, each name erased by time. Dust swirled in our beams like restless motes. The air felt thick. My ears popped as though we'd changed altitude. I rubbed at the sudden pressure in my skull. "Check this out," Cole said, crouching near the floor. "The stone's warm." I knelt. He was right. The granite beneath my palm held a slow heat, like skin over a pulse. A faint sound threaded through the silence, low, rhythmic. Not the wind, almost like breathing. Marcy's light flickered. "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, the door behind us slammed with a thunderous clang. We all jumped. Jake lunged back, yanking at the handle. "It's stuck!" I ran to help, but the bronze was slick as oil. My flashlight beam quivered over the seam. No gap at all, as if the door had fused with the frame. The air thickened further, heavy as wet cloth. That low sound grew louder, unmistakable now. A slow inhale, a shuddering exhale. The walls themselves seemed to tighten with each breath. Cole backed toward the center. "This is some kind of ventilation thing, right?" The floor shifted. Underfoot. A subtle rise and fall, like the swell of a chest. I stumbled, heart kicking hard. "It's the ground," I whispered. "It's breathing." Marcy whimpered. Her light died, plunging half the room into shadow. Then the walls began to move. Not a trick of my eyes. Granite panels bulged inward, stone softening like flesh. Veins of darker mineral pulsed faintly, carrying a dim reddish glow. My stomach churned. The air reeked now of copper and decay, a metallic sweetness that coated my tongue. Jake pounded the door. "Help! Somebody help!" A deep vibration answered, rolling through the floor like a growl. Something wet dripped onto my shoulder. I looked up. The ceiling rippled, slick and dark, and a bead of viscous fluid slid down my neck, warm as blood. Cole screamed. A length of wall behind him puckered, opening like a mouth. The granite stretched inward, teeth of jagged stone framing a slick throat. A sound like a giant heartbeat thundered through the chamber. He tried to run. The floor rose in a sudden swell, tripping him. The living wall lunged forward, sealing over him in a single wet motion. His scream cut off as if swallowed. "Cole!" Marcy shrieked. Jake grabbed her hand. "Move! Now!" We bolted between the crypts. The corridor twisted in ways that hadn't existed minutes ago, corners bending like the inside of a throat. Warm, air gusted from unseen vents, carrying that iron-sweet stench. My flashlight flickered with each step. A sudden contraction shuddered through the floor, throwing us to our knees. The heartbeat quickened, a deafening rhythm that vibrated through my bones. Ahead, a narrow shaft of light glowed, a crack where the door had been. We sprinted. Marcy reached it first. The seam widened as if the mausoleum exhaled, then snapped shut like a trap. She shrieked as the walls squeezed. Her flashlight clattered across the floor. I lunged, grabbing her arm, but the stone rippled up. Her legs, swallowing her waist in seconds. Her eyes met mine, wide, glassy, with a silent plea. Then the wall sealed, leaving only smooth granite. "No, no, no, no." My voice broke. Jake yanked me back. "We have to find another way." We stumbled deeper, the corridors now slick and glistening. My boots squelched in a thin layer of warm, dark fluid. The air tasted of iron and salt. Each breath burned. The path ended at a small chamber, pulsing. With a dull crimson glow, at its center lay a stone altar, or what looked like stone. It throbbed with each heartbeat, surface slick and warm. Jake stepped closer, transfixed. "It's alive," he whispered. The floor beneath us rose sharply, throwing us forward. Tendrils of stone, No, flesh, uncoiled from the walls, wrapping around Jake's ankles. I grabbed his arms, pulling hard. The tendrils tightened, dragging him toward the altar. He screamed, fingers clawing at the slick surface. One by one, they slipped from my grasp. "Danny!" His voice echoed as the floor swallowed him whole. Then silence, broken only by the slow, deliberate sound of breathing. Alone, I staggered back, heart hammering. The chamber quivered, walls closing like a tightening fist. I searched for any seam, any weakness, but the surfaces pulsed smooth and unbroken. My flashlight sputtered, then died. Darkness pressed in, warm and damp. The heartbeat slowed to a deep, resonant thud, and then a whisper, low and intimate, vibrating through the living stone. "Stay. Feed." The floor beneath me heaved, lifting me toward the altar. Heat seeped through my clothes, searing skin. I clawed. At the walls, nails tearing. A faint crack of moonlight split the chamber, far above where the ceiling met the wall. I leapt, fingers catching on a jagged edge. The stone flexed, trying to shrug me off, but desperation lent me strength. I hauled myself upward, scraping skin raw. The seam widened in a sudden exhale, and cold night air flooded in. I burst through, tumbling onto the frosted grass outside. Behind me, the mausoleum door hung open once more, silent and still. No pulse, no breath, just dead stone under the moon. Cole, Marcy, Jake gone. I staggered down the hill, never looking back. But even now, hours later, I can feel it. A slow, patient heartbeat, pulsing in rhythm with my own. Every Halloween, the kids in my town carve pumpkins for the old cemetery gate. It's a tradition as old as the cracked stones themselves, bright orange faces glowing against the wrought iron fence, meant to keep wandering spirits at bay. I never cared much for the superstition, but this year I went anyway, mostly to watch my little brother Ben. He's 11 and fearless in the worst way. The night was raw and windy, leaves scraping the pavement like dry whispers. We carried our carved pumpkins up the hill, the smell of damp earth and candle wax mixing in the cold air. The moon hung low, a thin blade behind racing clouds. When we reached the gate, something new stood among the pumpkins. It was a scarecrow, taller than any man, shoulders broad as the cemetery arch. A tattered black coat flapped around its stick frame, and instead of a burlap sack, a bleached skull sat atop the post. Empty sockets stared at us, teeth grinning wide and cracked. "That's not from last year," Ben said, voice small. "No," I agreed, my stomach tightening. Probably someone's idea of a prank, but the thing unnerved me. The skull was too real, jaw slightly crooked, faint hairline fractures catching the moonlight. The coat smelled faintly of rot when the wind shifted, a wet metallic tang that made me swallow hard. Kids from the neighborhood set their pumpkins around it anyway, nervous laughter mixing with the clink of candles and matches. Ben lingered close to the scarecrow, eyes gleaming with the daredevil light I knew too well. "Don't," I warned when I saw him draw back a foot. He grinned. "It's just a stupid decoration." Before I could grab him, he kicked the nearest pumpkin. It toppled and split, spilling its candle into the dirt. The night seemed to exhale. A soft, wet pop came from the broken gourd. Dark liquid seeped from the jagged mouth, thick and red, steaming in the cold. Someone screamed. The other kids scattered down the hill. I grabbed Ben's arm. "We're leaving. Now." Behind us, the scarecrow creaked. It wasn't the wind. I turned, heart hammering. The figure's head had tilted, the skull leaning toward us with a sound like snapping twigs. The jaw opened wider, bones grinding. The grin stretched impossibly, fissures widening until the teeth gleamed in a horrible arc. The pumpkins around its feet began to leak the same dark fluid, puddles glistening like blood under the moon. The smell of iron filled the air, thick and coppery, gagging. Ben froze, eyes wide. "It moved," he whispered. "Run," I said. We bolted down the path, gravel crunching underfoot. Behind us came a dry rustle, like cornstalks in a dead field. Faster and faster. I risked a glance back. The scarecrow was stepping off its post. Its long coat trailed like smoke as it glided forward, legs bending in stiff, jerking motions. Each step sounded like bone snapping under weight. The skull bobbed with an awful rhythm. Empty sockets locked on us. The cemetery gate groaned shut with a clang. Ben screamed. I yanked his arm, searching for another exit, but the iron fence stretched endless and unbroken. Wind howled through the trees, carrying a faint rattling, like laughter made of teeth. The pumpkins along the path burst one by one, splattering the stones with that thick red fluid. It splashed warm across my face. The metallic scent clung to my tongue, bitter and sweet. We dove behind a mausoleum, pressing into the damp stone. My breath came in sharp, white clouds. Ben trembled against me. The footsteps stopped. Silence heavier than the graveyard itself settled over us. I peeked around the corner. Nothing. Only the gate and the rows of bleeding pumpkins flickering in the moonlight. Then a shadow stretched across. The marble, long, skeletal, stretching toward us, though nothing stood in its path. A whisper rasped through the air, dry as dead leaves. Light the candles or join the harvest. My stomach nodded. I grabbed the matches from my pocket, fingers shaking so hard I almost dropped them. Ben, I whispered, we have to relight the pumpkin, all of them. His eyes glistened with terror, but he nodded. We crept from the mausoleum. The air pulsed, with cold, each breath like shards of glass. I struck a match. The sulfur sting filled my nose. One by one, we lit the candles inside the bleeding pumpkins. The scarecrow's shadow loomed closer with each flame, though the figure itself remained unseen. My heart thudded with the rhythm of the wind, or maybe something deeper. Finally, we reached the shattered pumpkin. Its halves oozed thick crimson that hissed when it touched the candle. I jammed the wick upright and struck the last match. The instant the flame caught, the air snapped, like a rope pulled tight. The iron gate swung open with a screech. A sudden silence fell. The shadow vanished. I turned slowly. The scarecrow stood once again on its post, head straight, grin fixed. The moonlight made its skull gleam like polished ivory. Not a drop of red stained the ground. Ben and I didn't speak. We ran, leaving the gate yawning behind us. I didn't sleep that night. The metallic smell clung to my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. When dawn came, I walked back to the cemetery alone. The pumpkins were whole. No blood, no scorch, marks, not even a broken stem. But on the stone where we'd hidden, something waited. A single perfect candle, wick still smoking, and beside it, etched into the frost, 3 words. I've always had a thing for old battlefields. Not the romantic, flag-waving kind of fascination, more like an ache to understand what those men endured. My name's Colin Reeves. By day I teach high school history. By night I run a tiny YouTube channel where I film forgotten war sites and tell their stories. When I heard about Hollow Creek, an unmarked Civil War skirmish ground deep in the Appalachian foothills, I knew I had to see it. The hike in was brutal. The forest felt older than the hills themselves, the air thick with damp earth and something sweeter, like rusted iron left in rain. My boots sank in mud that smelled faintly of smoke. I told myself it was just the swampy soil, but every step felt like walking on memories that hadn't settled. By the time I reached the clearing, twilight had bled into a strange copper dusk. A wide meadow opened under a sky streaked with violet clouds. I set up my tripod, framing the skeletal trees and low stone mounds where soldiers had supposedly been buried in haste. Local legend said no one ever found the bodies. I figured that was just folklore, until the moon rose. It came up enormous and wrong, not white, not even orange like a harvest moon, but deep, arterial red. Light pooled across the meadow like diluted blood, and the air turned metallic. My camera's color balance went haywire. Everything shimmered crimson. Then the ground moved. At first it was just a tremor, subtle enough to blame on my imagination. But the soft earth began to bulge, the grass quivering as if something pushed from below. A smell of scorched leather and decay seeped out, so strong it coated the back of my throat. I lifted the camera, zooming in. A hand broke through. Pale, filthy, fingers crooked like claws. Another followed, and another. All around the field, soil split open with wet, tearing sounds. Figures hauled themselves upright, men in tattered blue and gray uniforms, faces slack with rot, yet eyes bright as embers. Muskets clutched in skeletal hands. Drums began to beat, faint at first, then thunderous, though no drummer was visible. I should have run. Instead, I filmed. They formed ranks with eerie precision, silent but for the clash of rusted bayonets and the hollow thud of boots. Smoke drifted across the field, carrying the acrid bite of black powder. I could almost hear orders barked in some forgotten cadence. That's when one of them turned toward me. His jaw hung half loose, a beard stiff with dried blood. Yet his eyes, God, his eyes, burned with purpose. He pointed his bayonet in my direction, and every soldier in both lines pivoted to face me. Two armies, Union and Confederate, united in a single slow, deliberate motion. My breath snagged. I backed toward the trees, camera still rolling. A voice rode the wind, not from any throat, but from everywhere at once. The roll is short, the war unfinished. One more recruit to balance the dead. Something icy closed around my ankle. I looked down to see a gaunt hand rising from the mud, gripping tight enough to numb my foot. I kicked free, stumbling backward, but another hand shot up, then another. Fingers like iron latched onto my boots, my jeans, clawing for flesh. The smell of old blood filled my nose until I gagged. I dropped the camera and sprinted. Branches whipped my face, the forest spinning in red light. Behind me came the thunder of marching feet, hundreds of them. Yet when I risked a glance back, nothing moved among the trees, only the endless drumbeat growing closer. The woods seemed to stretch, each step doubling the distance to safety. My lungs burned. My heart pounded like its own snare drum. Then a figure materialized ahead, blocking the path. He wore a Union officer's coat, buttons dulled with tarnish. A saber hung at his side, blade black with age. His face was shadow, but his voice was clear and cold. "Fight or fall," he said. "The war requires the living." I shook my head, stumbling backward. I'm just a teacher. The living," he repeated, tilting his head as though listening to distant commands. The final measure. The red moonlight intensified, painting every tree the color of fresh wounds. Around me, shapes gathered, gray and blue coats alike, muskets aimed, bayonets glinting like wet teeth. The officer raised his saber, and then silence. A single gunshot cracked the night. White light flared, searing my eyes. When I blinked, I was alone. No soldiers, no drums, only the quiet hiss of crickets and the pale glow of an ordinary moon, white as bone. My camera lay in the grass where I'd dropped it, lens cracked but still recording. The footage showed nothing but empty meadow, breeze in the weeds. I ran the whole way back to my car. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But when I uploaded the video the next day, the audio track held something I hadn't heard. Out there, a low rhythmic drumming beneath the wind. And in the final frame, as the camera tilted toward the sky, a single line of text appeared across the static. Recruit confirmed. I don't sleep much now. Some nights when the moon is full, I hear marching in the distance, steady, patient, coming closer. I've spent years chasing nightscapes no one else bothers to capture. Deserted streets at 3 a.m., forgotten alleys, rooftops slick with rain. Darkness has always been my subject. So when the local paper ran a story about spectral sightings in Stonemount Cemetery, I couldn't resist. I told myself it was for the portfolio, long exposures of moonlight and fog, but the truth was simpler. I wanted to prove the rumors wrong. Halloween night found me at the gates with my Nikon tripod slung over my shoulder. The air was sharp and metallic, like cold iron. A mist curled through the headstones, dense enough to swallow the streetlights behind me. Perfect conditions for eerie shots. I set the first frame, 30-second exposure. The shutter clicked open. A thin, mechanical sigh. In that long silence, I heard only the wind combing dead leaves and the faint groan of tree limbs. When the shutter closed, I checked the display. Figures. 3 of them, pale as frost, clustered near a marble angel. Their faces were smudges of shadow, their limbs blurred as though caught mid-step. I spun around. Nothing but fog and stone. I told myself it was a trick of the light, overexposure, moisture on the lens. I wiped it clean and tried again, this time swinging the camera toward the central obelisk. 30 seconds later, the screen lit with more shapes, a crowd of translucent silhouettes, dozens of them, all turned toward me. I glanced over my shoulder. Empty air. My heartbeat drummed in. My ears. The wind shifted, carrying a smell of damp earth and something faintly sweet like old flowers left to rot. My breath came out white. I moved deeper among the graves, every step crunching frost-hardened grass. The mist thickened, swallowing the path. I set the tripod again, hands trembling now, and captured another frame. When the shutter snapped shut, the preview froze my blood. Front and center stood a figure with a camera raised to his eye, mirroring my stance exactly. The face was washed pale, the eyes twin voids of static. But the outline of the coat, the strap across the chest, the scuffed boots, every detail was mine. I jerked around, heart hammering. No one there. Only my own ragged breathing. I told myself to leave, but some morbid instinct forced me onward, toward the oldest section of the cemetery, where the stones leaned like tired soldiers. The fog parted just enough to reveal a single grave ahead, soil dark and freshly turned. A headstone jutted at its crown. The name carved into the granite stopped me cold. Elias Ward, my name, the date of death, tonight. I staggered back, the tripod slipping from my grip. The earth before the stone quivered, as though something below pressed upward. A muffled thump echoed beneath my feet, like a heartbeat under soil. A sudden flare from the camera screen made me flinch. I hadn't touched it. The display flicked through the night's shots on its own. The first 3 with the ghosts, the 4th with the figure of me. Then a 5th photo I hadn't taken. It showed me standing at this very grave, camera to my eye, while a pale hand, my own hand, reached from the soil to clutch my ankle. I spun, stumbling into the mist. The camera hung from its strap, clicking wildly though my finger never touched the shutter. Each flash lit glimpses of movement, a swirl of tattered coats, hollow eyes catching the strobe, mouths opening in silent welcome. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. I ran. The fog twisted the paths, every turn leading me deeper instead of out. The headstones blurred into streaks of gray. My own breath sounded distant, as though I were already outside my body. Behind me, the rapid fire. Shutters snapped again and again. I burst into a clearing and skidded to a halt. It was the same grave. My grave. The freshly dug earth gaped wider now, a black mouth breathing damp air. My camera lifted of its own accord, tugged by the strap around my neck. I grabbed for it, but my arms felt slow, syrupy. The viewfinder pressed to my eye. Through the lens, the world sharpened. The crowd of ghosts encircling me, their faces clearer than the living. And there, directly across the pit, stood a man with my features, identical down to the ragged breath. He raised his camera. The flash went off. A blinding white filled my vision. When it cleared, I was looking at myself, only it wasn't a reflection. The other me lowered his camera and smiled with a mouth that wasn't mine. Then he stepped back, into the crowd, vanishing like smoke. The strap around my neck tightened. The camera felt heavier, pulling me forward. I clawed at it, but the pressure only increased, dragging me toward the open grave. The ground beneath me trembled, welcoming. In. A final burst of panic, I ripped the strap free and hurled the camera into the pit. It vanished with a hollow clatter. Silence. The mist thinned. The figures dissolved. I stood alone, heart pounding. When I finally stumbled through the gates, dawn smeared the horizon. My hands were streaked with soil as if I'd been digging it. Home, I locked every door and tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, a nightmare. But when I powered on my computer to back up the night's work, the files were already there. Hundreds of images, all the same. Me standing at that grave, camera in hand, eyes black as void. I've smashed the hard drives, burned the memory cards. It doesn't matter. Every morning, new photos appear, on my phone, my email, even printed in the mailbox. Each one sharper than the last. In the latest, the grave behind me is no longer empty. A headstone rises, my name etched deeper, the soil, neatly packed. I don't go out at night anymore, but sometimes, just before sleep, I hear the faint click of a shutter, right beside my ear. I never planned to visit Fairview Cemetery on Halloween night, but grief has a way of pulling you toward the very places you fear most. My husband, Daniel, had been gone for almost a year, an accident on an icy road that still replayed behind my eyelids every night. I went to his grave each Sunday, but this year, October 31st felt different, like a date that hummed beneath the skin. I couldn't stay away. The sky was bruised purple when I parked at the iron gate. Wind slid cold fingers through my coat. Dead leaves skittered across the gravel path, their dry scrape sharp as whispers. I carried a single white rose, its scent faint against the chill. That's when I noticed the first candle, black wax, unlit, perched on a crumbling headstone. A second one glimmered deeper in the dark, then another, each balanced with deliberate care on forgotten graves. I followed the trail, heart knocking harder with every step. Far ahead, a figure moved between the stones. A tall man, hood drawn low, coat flaring like smoke in the gusts. He placed each candle gently, almost reverently, before gliding to the next grave. "Hello?" My voice cracked, small in the vast silence. He didn't turn. The only answer was the hush of wind and the faint smell of burnt wood, though none of the candles were lit. I tightened my grip on the rose and trailed him. The cemetery stretched deeper than I remembered, paths folding in on themselves. The moon ducked behind clouds, and darkness thickened until my breath felt visible. At last, the stranger stopped. Before him stood a headstone so new, its marble gleamed like bone. A single black candle rested at its base, wick quivering in the breeze. I stepped closer, the damp earth sucking at my shoes. The name carved into the stone stole the air from my lungs. Clara Ward. My name. Beneath it, today's date. The rose slid from my fingers. "Who are you?" My voice came out thin, almost childish. The hooded figure straightened. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his hood. Daniel. His face was pale as moonlight, the edges of his features blurring into shadow. His eyes were empty hollows, darker than the night around us, yet I felt them pierce straight through me. My knees weakened. "This isn't real," I whispered. "You're gone." He tilted his head, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the man I loved. Soft smile, a trace of warmth. Then the emptiness deepened. From those hollow sockets came a sound, low and echoing, like wind moaning through a crypt. "Clara," it said, but the word wasn't spoken. It vibrated inside my skull. I stumbled back. The ground beneath the headstone quivered. Soil shifted, rising and falling with a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. A cold draft swirled upward, carrying the smell of damp, earth and something sweeter, rot hidden under flowers. I turned to run. Every path I tried folded back toward the fresh grave. No matter how I wove between headstones, the black candle flickered ahead, guiding me in circles. The cemetery had become a maze, or maybe it always had been. Behind me came the faint hiss of a match. I spun. Daniel, if it was Daniel, held a single flame in his palm. The black candle ignited without his touch, its flame unnaturally still in the wind. The light threw his face into cruel relief. Skin stretched thin, lips pale as ash, eyes nothing but void. Yet I felt the old pull of him, the weight of shared memories. I wanted to step closer even as terror locked my muscles. Why? The words scraped from my throat. His voice arrived like distant thunder. A vow, unfinished. I remembered the promise we'd made during a storm years ago, till death do us part, and after. We'd laughed about it then. The earth at my feet split with a wet crack. Soil shifted, revealing black roots that glistened like veins. They coiled around my ankles, cold and strong, tugging gently, almost lovingly. I kicked free and fled, heart hammering. The candles dotted the path now, each one sparking to life as I passed, their flames pointing the way back to the grave, as if the whole cemetery conspired to guide me home. Daniel's voice followed, low and tender, echoing inside my bones. Stay. We'll be whole again. I reached the gate, breath tearing my lungs. For an instant I thought I was safe. Then I glanced back. The black candles burned in a perfect circle around my name. Daniel stood beside the headstone, hood raised. Once more, a dark silhouette against the flame-lit mist. He didn't move, didn't need to. I felt his gaze across the distance, empty and endless. The wind died. My rose lay on the path behind him, petals already browning. I turned and ran to the car, refusing to look again. It's been a year. Every Halloween night, a single black candle appears on my doorstep, wick unlit, smelling faintly of damp earth. No matter how far I travel, the candle finds me. I never return to Fairview, but sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, I hear his voice, just behind me, soft, hollow, patient, and I know the grave with my name is still waiting.